Welcome to Celine's Vamp Tales, where darkness meets redemption and courage comes from the most unexpected places. Today's story will take you into a world where a single act of kindness can topple kingdoms and rewrite destinies. If you love tales of vampires, betrayal, and impossible hope, you're in the right place. Now let's begin. A vampire king was left to burn at sunrise, but a single mother defied the court to save him. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his crimes. She only knew that no one deserves to die alone, and that one choice would change everything. The morning mist clung to the ruins of the Temple of Dawn like a burial shroud. Elsa Miller moved carefully through the overgrown path, her son David walking just ahead, his breath visible in the chill air. These early morning herb runs were their quiet ritual, a time before the village woke, before the pitying stares. David stopped suddenly. "Mama, do you hear that?" Elsa paused. Then she heard it, faint, rasping, barely human, breathing or dying. "Stay close," she whispered. There, beneath a fallen beam, lay a man. His skin was ashen, cracked like burnt parchment. Silver chains melted to his wrists, and along his arms, glowing faintly, were runes, ancient, royal, unmistakable. A vampire. And he was dying. His lips moved. "Water, please." If you're wondering whether she should have run, protected her son, you're not wrong. But Elsa had buried a husband. She had sworn she would never stand by and watch someone die if she had the power to stop it. She dropped to her knees. "David, the water flask. Now." She poured water between his cracked lips. He drank desperately. The sun climbed higher. A shaft of light touched his shoulder. Smoke rose instantly. He convulsed, crying out. Elsa tore off her cloak and threw it over him. "David, help me." Together they heaved the stone beam aside. The man collapsed into Elsa's arms, unconscious. She saw the sigil branded into his chest, the royal crest of House Nix. "Mama," David whispered. "Is he the king?" If this was Roderick Nix, the vampire king who'd vanished months ago, then someone very powerful had tried to kill him, and she had just saved his life. His lips moved again. "Lucien, forgive me. I tried." Elsa pressed her fingers to his throat, barely a pulse. "Help me get him to the cart." She didn't know if this was bravery or madness, but someone had chained him, burned him, and left him to die in a holy place. Whatever darkness lived in his blood, no one deserved that. They wheeled him through back paths to her cottage, into the root cellar behind the house. Hours later, Elsa descended the stairs with water, linen, and yarrow salve. His burns were worse than she'd thought. The runes on his chest still pulsed faintly. "Alaric," he muttered through fever. "Ravenna. Why?" Royal names. He had been betrayed. By family. Why would a single mother risk everything for a vampire? Because Elsa had seen cruelty before. This man whispering apologies to someone who wasn't there, he wasn't a monster. He was a father, and that she understood. She tipped willow bark extract onto his tongue. "You're safe now. Just rest." His breathing evened. Elsa didn't know what came next, but she had pulled him from the fire. Their fates were now bound. Behind her, Roderick Nix stirred, his lips forming a single word. "Elsa?" And in that moment, the first thread of a new story began. Not in blood or fire, but in trust, defiance, and the impossible hope that even the dead can be reborn. Elsa didn't sleep that night. She moved between the cellar and the kitchen in careful intervals, boiling water, crushing herbs, checking his pulse. The house creaked with familiar sounds, the settling of old wood, the whisper of wind through the eaves, but beneath it all was the weight of what she'd done, what she was hiding. In the cellar, Roderick lay motionless on the makeshift cot, his chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. The burns across his shoulders had begun to weep, and the silver chains, what remained of them, had to be removed before infection set in. Elsa knelt beside him with a pair of iron pliers and a bowl of salt water. Her hands trembled as she gripped the first piece of melted silver embedded in his wrist. "Forgive me," she whispered, and pulled. The metal came free with a sickening sound. Roderick's body jerked violently, his eyes snapping open, wild, unfocused, glowing faintly red in the dim light. "No," he gasped, his voice raw. "Don't, Alaric, please." "You're safe," Elsa said firmly, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "You're not there anymore. You're safe." His gaze darted around the cellar, confused, searching. Then it landed on her face. He blinked, the glow fading from his eyes. "Who?" His voice cracked. "Where am I?" "My home. You were dying. I brought you here." He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him. He collapsed back with a groan, his hand clutching his chest where the royal sigil still burned faintly beneath scorched skin. Elsa dipped her fingers into the yarrow salve and gently spread it across the worst of his burns. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "What's your name?" she asked softly. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter. It does to me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, barely audible, "Roderick." Elsa's breath caught. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was different. This wasn't just a vampire. This was the vampire, the one whose disappearance had shaken the entire region, whose name was whispered in fear and speculation. "Roderick Nix," she said quietly, "the vampire king." His eyes closed. "Not anymore." You might think a king would be arrogant, even in defeat, but there was no pride in his voice, only exhaustion, only grief. "What happened to you?" Elsa asked. Roderick's breathing grew labored, his hands clenched into fists, and when he spoke, the words came in fragmented bursts, like pieces of a shattered mirror. "My brother, Alaric. He said I'd grown weak, that I cared more for humans than our own kind." He swallowed hard. "Ravenna, my wife. She stood with him. And Lucian, my son." His voice broke. "They told him I was a traitor, that I'd planned to surrender the throne to mortals. He believed them. He signed the decree himself." Elsa's chest tightened. "What decree?" Roderick's eyes opened, and in them she saw something she hadn't expected from an immortal. Tears. "Death by sunrise," he whispered, "chained in silver, left in the temple where the sun would find me first." He turned his face away. "My own son condemned me to burn." Elsa sat back, her mind reeling. A father betrayed by his family, a king stripped of everything, and somehow impossibly still alive. "Why?" she asked. "Why did they do this?" "Because I refused to slaughter innocents." His voice hardened. "Alaric wanted to purge the border villages, humans who'd done nothing wrong. I said no, so he made me the enemy." Elsa looked down at her hands, still stained with his blood. "Then you're not the monster they say you are." Roderick laughed bitterly. "I've lived for centuries, Elsa. I've done things that would make you run screaming. Don't mistake survival for virtue." "Maybe not," she said quietly. "But you didn't have to tell me the truth. You could have lied, and you didn't." He had no answer for that. The next evening, as Elsa prepared a thin broth in the kitchen, she heard the cellar door creak open. She turned sharply and found David standing at the top of the stairs, a bowl of soup in his hands. "David, no, I just want to give him this," her son said, his voice small but steady. "He hasn't eaten." Elsa's heart twisted. She should stop him, should keep him far away from a creature who could kill him with a single movement. But when she looked into David's eyes, she saw something that stopped her cold. Compassion. "Stay where I can see you," she said finally. David nodded and descended the stairs. Elsa followed close behind. In the cellar, Roderick was awake, propped against the wall. His eyes tracked David's approach, wary but not hostile. David set the bowl down carefully. Mama made soup, it's good. She puts carrots in it. Roderick stared at the boy, then at the soup, as if he'd forgotten what kindness looked like. Thank you, he said hoarsely. David didn't leave. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the floor, watching Roderick with open curiosity. Are you really a king? I was. What happened? I made mistakes, and the people I loved made me pay for them. David tilted his head. Mama says mistakes don't make you bad. They just make you human. Roderick's expression cracked. He looked away quickly, but not before Elsa saw the grief wash over his face. I'm not human, he said quietly. But you're sad, David replied. And sad is sad. It doesn't matter what you are. If you've ever wondered what breaks a king, not a sword, not a crown, not even betrayal, it's this. A child's simple truth, spoken without fear. Later, after David had gone to bed, Elsa returned to the cellar. Roderick was staring at the empty soup bowl, his expression unreadable. He's not afraid of me, Roderick said. No, Elsa agreed. He's not. He should be. Maybe, but he sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. Roderick looked up at her, his eyes shadowed and ancient. And what do you see? Elsa met his gaze without flinching. A man who was left to die, and a father who's still fighting to live. For the first time since she'd found him, Roderick Nix, the fallen vampire king, smiled. It was faint, fleeting, and laced with pain, but it was real. Then help me live long enough to make this right, he said. Elsa nodded. I will. And with those two words, she bound herself to a path she couldn't yet see, one that would lead through shadow, betrayal, and blood, but also, perhaps, to something neither of them expected, redemption. 3 days passed before Roderick could stand without collapsing. Elsa watched from the cellar doorway as he gripped the wooden beam for support, his legs trembling beneath him. The burns had begun to heal, faster than any mortal wound, but the damage ran deeper than flesh. She could see it in the way he moved, careful and guarded, like a man who'd forgotten how to trust his own body. You're pushing too hard, she said. I've been weak long enough. His voice was rough, but determined. Weakness isn't the same as healing. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. You speak like someone who's learned that the hard way. Elsa didn't answer. She didn't need to. That evening, she brought him fresh clothes. Thomas's clothes, the ones she'd kept folded in a trunk, because she couldn't bear to throw them away. They were too small for Roderick's frame, but cleaner than the scorched rags he'd been wearing. He accepted them without comment, then hesitated. Your husband's? Yes. I'm sorry. Don't be. He would have wanted them used. She set down a plate of bread and cheese. You need to eat. Real food this time, not just broth. Roderick stared at the plate like it was a foreign object. I haven't eaten human food in centuries. Then it's time you remembered what it tastes like. You might wonder how a vampire survives without blood. The truth is, they don't. Not for long. But Roderick was surviving anyway, on stubbornness and something else Elsa couldn't quite name. Something like hope. He picked up the bread, tore off a piece, and chewed slowly. His expression shifted. Surprise, then something almost like pleasure. It's good, he said quietly. Don't sound so shocked. I'm a decent cook. For the first time, she heard him laugh. It was brief, barely more than a breath, but it was there. Then his face darkened. The laughter died. Elsa, he said slowly, you need to understand something. What I told you before, about Alaric, about Ravenna, it's worse than I said. She sat down on an overturned crate. Tell me. Roderick leaned against the wall, his jaw tight. Alaric wasn't just my brother. He was my closest advisor, my friend. For 300 years, we ruled together. I trusted him with everything, my kingdom, my family, my life. He paused, his hands curling into fists. When the human settlement started growing on our borders, there was tension. Some of my court wanted to crush them, make examples, but I refused. I'd seen enough bloodshed. I wanted peace. And Alaric didn't. No, he saw weakness. He convinced Ravenna that I was compromising our future, that I'd rather protect mortals than my own kind. His voice dropped. And maybe he was right. Maybe I had grown weak. Compassion isn't weakness, Elsa said firmly. Tell that to the court that tried to burn me alive. She had no response to that. Roderick continued, his words coming faster now, like poison he needed to purge. Ravenna and we hadn't been close in decades. Our marriage was political. But Lucien, his voice cracked. Lucien was different. He was my son, my pride. I thought he understood what I was trying to build. But Alaric got to him first. He told Lucian I'd signed a treaty surrendering vampire territories to human rule, that I'd betrayed our bloodline. It was a lie, all of it. But Alaric forged documents, forged my signature, and Lucian believed him. Roderick's hands shook. The last thing my son said to me was, "You're not my father anymore. You're a traitor." Then he walked away while they chained me in silver and dragged me to the temple. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you know that pain doesn't fade with time. It doesn't matter if you're mortal or immortal. Some wounds never heal. Elsa reached out and placed her hand over his. He stiffened, then slowly relaxed. He was lied to, she said. That doesn't excuse what he did, but he didn't know the truth. Does it matter? He chose to believe the lie. Because he's your son, and sons want to believe their fathers are infallible. When that image cracks, they don't know what to do. She squeezed his hand. But if you have proof, if you can show him what really happened, I have nothing. Alaric made sure of that. Every document, every witness, every piece of evidence was destroyed or turned against me. Elsa's mind raced. Not everything. You're still alive. That's proof enough that someone wanted you silenced, not just removed. Roderick looked at her with something like wonder. You're thinking like a strategist. I'm thinking like a mother. We protect what matters, and we don't stop until it's safe. She stood. If your brother took your throne through lies, then we find the truth, and we make sure Lucien sees it. Elsa, you don't understand what you're suggesting. Going against Alaric means going against the entire vampire court. They'll kill you. They'll kill David. Then we don't give them the chance. Her voice was steel. You said you wanted to make this right, so let's make it right. Roderick stared at her, this mortal woman with calloused hands and a fire in her eyes, and for the first time in months, he felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Purpose. All right, he said, but we do this carefully. Alaric has eyes everywhere. One wrong move and a creak from upstairs. They both froze. Footsteps. Multiple. Heavy. Elsa's heart stopped. David's asleep upstairs. Roderick's eyes flashed red. Get to him. Now. And just like that, the fragile safety they'd built shattered. Because the past doesn't stay buried, and some enemies don't wait for you to be ready. Elsa's pulse thundered as she crept up the cellar stairs. Above, the footsteps had stopped. She pressed her ear to the door, listening. Silence. Then, a knock. Firm but not aggressive. Elsa Miller. It's Marcus from the Village Watch, just checking in. Her breath released in a shaky exhale. Not Alaric's men, just Marcus, the baker's son who'd taken up the watch after his father died. He'd been kind to her after Thomas passed. She opened the door a crack. Marcus, it's late. The young man stood on her porch, lantern in hand, looking apologetic. I know. Sorry, there have been reports of strange movements near the old temple. Captain wanted us to check on folks living near the woods." Behind him, 2 other watchmen waited in the yard. "I'm fine," Elsa said quickly. "David and I are safe." Marcus glanced past her into the darkened cottage. "You sure? We could do a quick sweep, make sure—" "No." Too sharp. She softened her tone. "We're fine. Truly. I appreciate you checking." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But if you see anything unusual, tracks, sounds, anything, you send David to the village immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." "I won't. Thank you, Marcus." She closed the door and leaned against it, heart still racing. Through the window, she watched the watchman disappear down the path. When she returned to the cellar, Roderick was standing, his body tense, ready for a fight that hadn't come. "They're gone," she said. "Just a patrol." He didn't relax. "They're looking for something. Someone must have seen us." "No one saw. They're just being cautious." "Cautious men don't knock on doors at midnight, Elsa." She wanted to argue, but he was right. The temple was only a mile from her cottage. If someone had investigated the ruins and found the chains, the blood— "We need to be more careful," she said finally. "We need to leave. You and David should go to the village, somewhere with people—" "No." Her voice was firm. "This is my home. I'm not abandoning it because of rumors and fear." Sometimes, the most dangerous thing about fear isn't what it makes you do, it's what it stops you from doing. And Elsa had learned long ago that running only delays the inevitable. Roderick looked like he wanted to argue, but footsteps sounded again, lighter this time. David appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, I heard voices." Elsa's heart clenched. "Just the night watch, sweetheart. Go back to bed." But David's attention had already shifted to Roderick. "You're standing up." Roderick's expression softened immediately. "I am." "Does it still hurt?" "Less than before." David descended the stairs fully, clutching his wooden toy horse. "That's good. Mama says pain means you're healing." "Your mother is wise." The boy sat on the bottom step, apparently unconcerned about the late hour or the vampire in the cellar. "Can I ask you something?" Roderick lowered himself to sit against the wall, moving carefully. "You may." "Were you really a king?" "I was." "Did you live in a castle?" "I did. A very old one with towers that touched the clouds." David's eyes widened. "Did you have knights?" "Of a sort. Vampires who swore to protect the realm." "And treasure?" A faint smile. "Mountains of it. Gold, jewels, things collected over centuries." "Wow." David hugged his toy horse. "I've never seen a castle, or treasure, or anything like that." Roderick's expression grew distant. "Neither has brought me much happiness, if I'm honest." "Why not?" "Out of the mouths of children come the questions adults are too afraid to ask." "Because," Roderick said slowly, "I spent so much time protecting things, the throne, the treasury, the title, that I forgot to protect what mattered." "What matters?" "The people you love, the ones who see you, not your crown." David considered this seriously. "Is that why they hurt you? Because you forgot?" "No. They hurt me because I remembered too late." Elsa watched the exchange with a tight throat. There was something achingly gentle in the way Roderick spoke to her son, as if David's questions weren't childish, but profound. "Mr. Roderick," David said, "just Roderick." "Roderick, do you know how to play chess?" The vampire blinked, surprised. Yes, I do." "Will you teach me? Mama doesn't know how, and I found a board in the market, but no one will play with me." Roderick glanced at Elsa, uncertain. She nodded. "If you're feeling strong enough." "I think I can manage a game of chess." David's face lit up. He scrambled back upstairs and returned moments later with a battered wooden chess set, half the pieces chipped or mismatched. He set it up on an old crate between them, tongue poking out in concentration as he arranged the pieces. Roderick watched with something like wonder. It's been a very long time since anyone asked me to play. Mama says games are how you learn to think ahead. She's right. They began. Roderick explained the movements, the pawn's steady march, the knight's unusual leap, the queen's devastating range. David listened intently, moving pieces with careful deliberation. "You're leaving your king exposed," Roderick said gently. "Oh." David moved a pawn to block. "Better. Always protect what you cannot replace." They played in comfortable silence, broken only by David's questions and Roderick's patient answers. Elsa sat on the stairs, watching. There was something surreal about it. Her son playing chess with a vampire king in a root cellar at midnight. But more than that, there was something healing. David lost the first game quickly. "Can we play again? Tomorrow you should sleep." "But, David," Elsa said softly, "bed." He sighed but stood, clutching his toy horse. "Good night, Roderick." "Good night, David." After the boy had gone upstairs, Roderick sat in the quiet, staring at the chessboard. "He's remarkable," he said. "He is. He's not afraid of me. Even after everything I've told you, everything you know I am, he just sees a person. That's who you are to him. Not a king, not a monster, just Roderick. And maybe that's what redemption really looks like. Not grand gestures or heroic acts, but small moments of connection that remind us we're more than our worst mistakes." Roderick looked up at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I had a son once who looked at me like that, before everything fell apart." "Then maybe," Elsa said gently, "it's time you got him back." Roderick nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." And for the first time since she'd pulled him from the flames, Elsa saw not a broken king, but a father ready to fight for his family. By the end of the week, Roderick could walk without assistance. Elsa watched him pace the small confines of the cellar, his movement still careful but growing stronger. The burns had faded to angry scars, and the runes on his chest no longer glowed, though they remained etched into his skin like a brand he could never remove. He was regaining his strength, and with it, his focus. "I need to see the temple," he said one evening, "where they left me." Elsa looked up from mending one of David's shirts. "Why?" "Because Alaric is meticulous. He wouldn't leave evidence lying around, but he might have missed something in his haste to cover up my execution." Roderick's jaw tightened. "If there's any proof of what he did, it would be there. The watch is patrolling that area. If they see you, they won't. I'll go at night, when the patrols change shifts." Elsa set down her needle. "You mean we'll go?" "Absolutely not. You can barely walk a mile without resting. You need someone to watch your back." "Elsa, if we're caught, then we'll be caught together." Her tone left no room for argument. "You're not doing this alone. Sometimes partnership isn't about agreement. It's about refusing to let someone face the darkness by themselves." They left just after midnight, when David was deep in sleep and the village had gone quiet. Elsa left a note on the kitchen table just in case. "Gone to gather night-blooming herbs, back by dawn." The forest was different in darkness. The trees seemed taller, their branches like skeletal fingers against the star-scattered sky. Roderick moved with surprising silence for someone who'd been near death days ago, his vampiric nature reasserting itself. Elsa stayed close, her lantern shuddered to show only the faintest sliver of light. When they reached the temple ruins, Roderick stopped abruptly, his hands clenched. Even in the dim light, Elsa could see the tremor run through him. "I can still smell the burning," he whispered. "My own flesh." Elsa touched his arm gently. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." He took a breath and stepped forward. The ruins looked different at night, more ominous, more ancient. The fallen beam where Elsa had found him still lay askew, the ground beneath it scorched black. Roderick knelt there, his fingers tracing the burn marks. "They chained me here at midnight. Alaric wanted me to have hours to think about what was coming, to break before the sun did. But you didn't break. No, I spent those hours thinking about Lucian, wondering if he'd come, if he'd realize the truth and stop it. His voice went hollow. He never came. Elsa crouched beside him, scanning the area. What are we looking for? Anything Alaric might have dropped. Orders, correspondence, even the key to the chains. Something that could prove this wasn't a lawful execution. They searched in tense silence, combing through debris and ash. Elsa's fingers found bits of melted silver, fragments of cloth, nothing useful. Then Roderick went still. Elsa. His tone made her heart skip. She hurried over. He was staring at something wedged beneath a collapsed stone column, a leather satchel partially hidden, coated in dust. "That's not mine," he said, "and it wasn't here when they brought me." Elsa helped him shift the stone enough to pull the satchel free. Inside were papers, folded, sealed with wax, some still bearing the royal crest. Roderick's hand shook as he unfolded the first document. His face went pale. "What is it?" Elsa asked. "A treaty, signed with my seal, but I never wrote this." He spread it out, pointing to the terms. "It surrenders 3 vampire territories to human expansion, complete capitulation. This is what Alaric showed the court to prove I was a traitor." "But you didn't sign it." "No, but the signature is perfect. He must have had a forger, someone skilled enough to replicate my hand exactly." Elsa pulled out another document. This one was a letter addressed to Prince Lucian. She read it aloud. "My son, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Know that I chose this path willingly for the good of our people. Do not mourn me. Lead them better than I could. Trust your uncle Alaric. He will guide you where I failed." Roderick's breath came in ragged gasps. "I never wrote that. I would never—" "I know." Elsa kept reading. "It's dated the day before your execution. Alaric made sure Lucian would have this, made sure he'd believe you chose to disappear rather than fight. Lies are most effective when they're wrapped in just enough truth to feel real, and Alaric had crafted the perfect lie. There were more documents, execution orders bearing Lucien's forged signature, correspondence between Alaric and Ravenna discussing the transition of power, even a list of loyalists to be removed once Roderick was gone. "This is everything," Elsa breathed. "This proves the conspiracy. It proves Alaric is a traitor, but it doesn't prove Lucian was manipulated, not definitively. Then we find more. A twig snapped behind them. They froze. Footsteps. Multiple. Approaching fast. "Run!" Roderick hissed, shoving the documents into Elsa's hands. "Get these back to the cottage." "I'm not leaving you." "Go!" 3 figures emerged from the trees, watchmen, their lanterns raised high. "Stop right there!" Roderick stepped in front of Elsa, his eyes flashing red in the lamplight. "Run now!" Elsa hesitated for one agonizing heartbeat. Then she clutched the satchel to her chest and bolted into the trees. Behind her, she heard shouts, the sound of a scuffle. She wanted to turn back to help him, but the documents in her hands were proof. They were everything. She ran harder, branches whipping her face, lungs burning. She didn't stop until she reached the cottage. Didn't stop until she'd hidden the satchel beneath the floorboards in her bedroom. Didn't stop shaking until dawn broke and she heard a familiar voice at the cellar door. "Elsa!" She flew down the stairs. Roderick stood there, bloodied but alive, a fresh gash across his cheek already healing. "They didn't follow me," he said. "I convinced them I was just a drifter scavenging the ruins." "Did they believe you?" "For now." He looked at her with fierce intensity. "Did you get the documents?" "Yes, they're hidden." "Good." He gripped her shoulders. "Because now we have what we need. Now we can fight back." And in that moment, hiding in a root cellar with stolen proof and borrowed time, 2 unlikely allies became something more dangerous. Conspirators with everything to lose and a kingdom to save. 2 weeks of planning. 2 weeks of Roderick regaining his full strength, while Elsa made careful inquiries in the village. 2 weeks of David teaching Roderick laughter between chess games while the adults plotted rebellion in whispers. Now, standing at the edge of the forest overlooking the vampire capital, Elsa's courage finally wavered. The city sprawled below them, ancient stone towers piercing the twilight sky, bridges of silver spanning impossible distances, and at its heart, the palace. Massive, elegant, and utterly terrifying. "We can still turn back," Roderick said quietly. Elsa looked at him. He wore the dark robes of a mourning priest borrowed from the village church. His hair was pulled back, his face partially shadowed by a deep hood. He looked nothing like a king. That was the point. "No," she said. "We've come too far." David stood between them, clutching Elsa's hand tightly. She'd tried to leave him with a neighbor, but he'd refused. "Where you go, I go," he'd said with such fierce determination that she couldn't deny him. Now she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is trust her child to be brave alongside her. "The coronation begins at sunset," Roderick said. "Alaric will have Lucian crowned before the entire court. Every noble house, every elder, every witness he needs to legitimize the transfer of power. And we'll be there," Elsa confirmed, "in the crowd, hidden. When Lucian takes his vows, that's when I reveal myself." Roderick's jaw tightened. "It has to be public. Alaric's power comes from the lie that I'm dead. If I appear before the court, if I show them the truth, he can't silence you without proving he tried to kill you." Exactly. They made their way down the hidden path Roderick remembered from centuries past. The city gates stood open for the ceremony, nobles streaming in from across the realm, all dressed in formal blacks and deep crimsons. Elsa pulled her own hood lower, keeping David close. They blended into the crowd, just 3 more mourners come to witness history. The palace courtyard was vast, filled with hundreds of vampires and their human servants. Torches blazed despite the fading daylight, casting everything in flickering gold. At the center, on a raised dais, stood the throne, and beside it 3 figures. Alaric, tall, dark-haired, with Roderick's features, but sharper, crueler. His smile was gracious, but his eyes were cold. Ravenna, beautiful and deadly in midnight blue, her expression serene, untouchable. And Lucian. Elsa's breath caught. The young prince looked so much like his father, the same strong jawline, the same intense eyes. But where Roderick carried grief, Lucian carried only rigid determination. He stood in full ceremonial armor, his face pale but composed. Roderick went rigid beside her. "That's him," he whispered, "my son." The ceremony began with ancient words in a language Elsa didn't understand, but she understood the weight of them, the finality. Alaric stepped forward, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "We gather to honor the memory of King Roderick Nix, who fell to his own weakness and betrayal. But from tragedy comes renewal. Tonight, we crown a new king, one who will lead us into strength, not compromise." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Prince Lucian has proven his loyalty. He made the hardest choice a son can make, to put the realm above blood. For that, he has earned this throne. Lucian's expression didn't change, but Elsa saw his hands clench. Alaric lifted the crown, ancient silver, set with blood-red stones. "Lucienne Nix, do you swear to protect this realm against all threats, mortal and immortal alike?" "I do." "Do you swear to uphold the old laws, to honor the blood, to never show weakness in the face of our enemies?" "I do." This was it. The moment everything would change. Alaric raised the crown higher. "Then by the power vested in me as regent and elder, I name you—" "Stop!" The word cut through the courtyard like a blade. Every head turned. Roderick stepped forward, pulling back his hood. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed. Alaric's face went white. Impossible! Roderick walked slowly toward the dais, his presence commanding despite his simple robes. The crowd parted before him like water. "Before you crown a king," Roderick said, his voice ringing clear and strong, "ask yourselves, what did you burn to clear the throne?" Lucian staggered backward, his face a mask of shock. "Father?" "Hello, Lucian." Pandemonium erupted. Nobles shouted questions, guards drew weapons, but no one moved. No one knew what to do. Alaric recovered first. "Seize him! This is some impostor, some trick." "Is it?" Roderick raised his arms, showing the burn scars still visible on his wrists. "Then explain these. Explain why I bear the marks of silver chains and holy fire." He pulled open his robe, revealing the royal sigil branded into his chest. "Explain why I carry the mark only a crowned king can bear, one that cannot be forged, cannot be stolen, cannot be faked." The crowd pressed closer, staring. Alaric's composure cracked. "You were executed lawfully. You betrayed—" "I betrayed nothing," Roderick's voice thundered. "You framed me, brother. You and Ravenna. You forged documents, manipulated my son, and tried to murder me to steal my throne." "Lies." "Then explain this." Elsa stepped forward, pulling the documents from beneath her cloak. Her hands shook, but her voice held steady. Treaties King Roderick never signed, letters he never wrote, execution orders with forged seals. She held them high, all found hidden near the temple where you left him to burn. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a sword or spell, it's truth, spoken loud enough that silence becomes impossible. Ravenna moved then, her hand going to a concealed blade, but Lucien stepped between her and Roderick, his voice breaking. "Is it true? Did you lie to me?" Alaric's mask finally shattered. "He would have destroyed us. He cared more for humans than—" "Answer the question," Lucian's shout echoed. "Did you lie?" Silence. Then Alaric smiled, cold, vicious. "What does it matter? He's still weak, still a traitor in spirit, if not in deed. And you, nephew, already signed his death warrant once. The court witnessed it." He gestured to the guards. "Execute them, all of them. The false king, the human woman, the child. No." Lucian's blade was at Alaric's throat before anyone could move. "You will not touch them." The courtyard held its breath. Lucien's blade pressed against Alaric's throat, steady despite the tremor in his voice. "You will not touch them." Alaric's eyes narrowed. "Put down the sword, nephew. You're confused, emotional." "I signed my father's execution." Lucian's words came out raw, anguished. "I condemned him to burn because you showed me proof, treaties, letters, evidence that he'd betrayed us all." His hand tightened on the blade. "Was any of it real?" Alaric's silence was answer enough. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Nobles exchanged uncertain glances. Guards looked to each other, unsure who to obey. Ravenna stepped forward, her voice smooth as silk. "Lucien, darling, your father was ill. His judgment compromised. We did what was necessary. You let me believe I'd killed him." Lucian's composure cracked. "I mourned him. I blamed myself for being strong enough to do what he couldn't. And it was all a lie?" Roderick moved closer, slowly, hands raised. "Lucien, don't." The prince's voice broke. "Don't come closer. I can't. How do you face the father you condemned to death? How do you reconcile love and betrayal when both are equally true?" Elsa watched the young prince's face cycle through emotions: shock, grief, rage, shame. She'd seen that look before, in David's eyes when he'd learned his father wasn't coming home, the look of a world breaking apart. Alaric seized the moment of hesitation. "You see? Even now he wavers. He's not fit to rule. I only did what you wanted." Roderick's voice cut through. You wanted the throne, brother. You always did. You just needed me out of the way. You were making us weak. I was trying to build something better than endless war." Alaric laughed bitterly. "Better? You call cowering before humans better? They're cattle, Roderick. Food, tools, nothing more." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Elsa felt eyes turn toward her, the human woman who dared enter their sacred space. David pressed closer to her side. Roderick's voice went cold. "If that's what you believe, then you've already lost what made us worth ruling in the first place." He turned to address the assembled court. "I know what I was, what I am. I've lived for centuries, and yes, I've taken blood. I've made choices I regret. But I also learned something our ancestors forgot, that power without purpose is just violence, and violence without end destroys everything, including ourselves." He gestured to Elsa. "This woman saved my life. She risked everything, her safety, her son, her home, for someone she had every reason to fear. She didn't do it for reward or recognition. She did it because it was right." Elsa's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to become part of his testimony. "If a mortal can show that kind of courage," Roderick continued, "what does it say about us that we can't show mercy to our own kind?" "Heresy," someone muttered in the crowd, but others nodded. Elsa could see it, the fracture spreading through the assembled nobles, doubt taking root. Alaric saw it too. His expression hardened. "Enough of this theater." He shoved Lucian's blade aside with inhuman speed and gestured sharply. "Guards, arrest the pretender and his accomplices, now!" Half the guards moved forward. The other half hesitated. Ravenna's voice rang out, commanding. "You heard your regent. Obey." "I am still your prince," Lucian shouted, "and I order you to stand down." Chaos erupted. Guards turned on each other. Nobles shouted conflicting orders. Someone drew a weapon. Roderick grabbed Elsa and David, pulling them behind him as the courtyard descended into violence. "We need to move," he said urgently. "Now." But Alaric was faster. He appeared before them in a blur of motion, his hand closing around Roderick's throat. "You should have stayed dead, brother." Roderick choked, clawing at Alaric's grip. "And you should have been content with what you had." Alaric's eyes glowed red. "I was never content with your scraps." He lifted Roderick off the ground, squeezing tighter. Roderick's face darkened, his struggles weakening. Elsa didn't think. She grabbed a fallen guard's sword and drove it toward Alaric's back. He released Roderick with one hand and caught the blade bare-handed, wrenching it from her grip. Blood dripped from his palm, but he didn't flinch. "Brave," he said, "but foolish." He backhanded Elsa across the face. She hit the ground hard, tasting blood. "Mama!" David screamed. Sometimes courage isn't enough. Sometimes the monster is faster, stronger, more ruthless. Sometimes you fight anyway. Lucian's voice cut through the chaos. "Let them go, Alaric." The regent turned, still holding Roderick by the throat. "Or what, nephew? You'll kill me? You don't have the spine." "No." Lucian's voice was steady now, cold. "But I have the truth." He held up the documents Elsa had brought, high enough for everyone to see. "These prove everything. The forgeries, the conspiracy, the murder plot. And they bear your seal, Uncle. Not my father's, yours." Alaric's expression twisted. "You'd believe her word over mine, a human? I believe the evidence, and I believe what I see right now, you trying to kill my father a second time." Lucian's voice broke. "I was wrong about him. I won't be wrong about you." He turned to the court. "I renounce my claim to the throne. It was never mine to take. My father lives. He is your rightful king." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Alaric released Roderick, letting him drop. "You would throw away everything I built for you. You built nothing but lies." Lucian knelt beside his father, helping him stand. Their eyes met. Father and son broken and reunited. "I'm sorry," Lucian whispered. "I'm so sorry." Roderick's hand shook as he touched his son's face. "I know," Alaric snarled. "Touching, but meaningless." He moved faster than sight, blade drawn, aimed at Roderick's heart. Ravenna stepped between them. The blade pierced her chest. She gasped, blood blooming across her gown. Everyone froze. Alaric's face went white. "Ravenna!" "Enough," she breathed, her hand gripping the blade. "I'm tired, of your ambition, destroying everything." She fell. Alaric caught her, his expression shattering into something almost human. No, you don't." But she was already fading, her immortal life bleeding out onto the ancient stones. And just like that, the architect of betrayal learned what it meant to lose something he actually loved. Guards seized Alaric while he cradled Ravenna's body, his rage dissolving into grief. The courtyard went silent. Roderick stood slowly, supported by his son, and looked at the crown still resting on the dais. Then he did something no one expected. He walked past it. "I don't want it," he said quietly. The council chamber was quiet. Too quiet. After the chaos of the courtyard, after Alaric had been dragged away still clutching Ravenna's body, after the nobles had dispersed in confusion and shock, Roderick had requested one thing: time alone with his son. Now they sat across from each other in the room where Roderick had once made decisions that shaped kingdoms. The furniture was the same. The tapestries still hung on the walls, but everything felt different. Lucian stared at his hands. They were shaking. "I don't know how to start," he said finally. Roderick's voice was gentle. "Neither do I." Outside the door, Elsa waited with David, giving them privacy, but she'd insisted on staying close, just in case. She trusted Roderick. She wasn't sure yet about the volatile young prince who'd spent months believing his father was a traitor. Inside, silence stretched between father and son. Then Lucian spoke, his voice breaking. "I watched the sun rise that morning. Did you know that?" Roderick went still. "I stood on the eastern tower and watched it come up over the horizon, and all I could think was, he's burning right now. My father is burning, and it's because I wasn't strong enough to stop him from betraying us." Tears streamed down Lucian's face. "But you weren't burning because you were weak. You were burning because I was a fool. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive isn't the one who wronged you, it's yourself." "You were lied to," Roderick said quietly. "Expertly, deliberately lied to by people you trusted. I should have questioned it, should have demanded to see you, to hear your side. You were grieving, and grief makes us vulnerable to manipulation." Roderick leaned forward. Alaric knew exactly what to say, what evidence to show. He'd been planning this for years, Lucian. You were just the final piece he needed. Lucian's hands clenched. "I signed the execution order. My hand, my seal, my choice. A choice made under false pretenses. Does that matter? You still burned. You still suffered because of what I did." Roderick was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Do you want to know what I thought about, chained in that temple?" Lucian looked up, his eyes red. "I thought about the day you were born. You were so small, so fragile. And I remember thinking, this is what matters. Not the throne, not the power, not centuries of tradition. Just this tiny life depending on me to protect him." Roderick's voice cracked. "I thought about every time I chose the kingdom over you, every dinner I missed, every lesson I delegated, every moment I was too busy being a king to be your father. And I realized that Alaric was right about one thing. I had failed. Not the kingdom. You." "Father, let me finish." Roderick wiped his eyes. "When the sun hit me, when I felt my skin burning, the pain was indescribable. But worse than the pain was knowing that my son believed I'd betrayed him, that my last legacy would be shame. He stood, moving to the window. Dawn was breaking outside, the sun he'd once feared now just a distant glow. But then I survived, and a stranger saved me. A human woman with no reason to care whether I lived or died. She risked everything for someone she'd never met. Roderick turned back to his son. And her son, David. He looked at me without fear, without judgment. He just saw someone who was hurting and decided that was enough reason to care. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying that I learned something in that cellar, broken and helpless. I learned that the power I'd spent centuries protecting meant nothing compared to simple kindness, that the throne I'd fought for was worthless compared to being seen as a person, not a title. Roderick knelt before his son, taking his hands. You made a terrible mistake, Lucian, one that cost me dearly, but I made mistakes too, mistakes that created the distance Alaric exploited. We both failed each other, and we both have to live with that. Lucian's shoulders shook. How do I live with it? How do I wake up every day knowing the same way I do, by choosing to be better, by making the pain mean something? Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about refusing to let what happened define what comes next. Lucian collapsed forward and Roderick caught him, holding his son as he wept. Great, wrenching sobs that sounded like they'd been locked inside for months. I'm sorry, Lucian gasped. I'm so sorry, Father. I know, son. I forgive you. They held each other in the growing light, two men trying to piece together something that had been shattered. When Lucian finally pulled back, his face was blotchy and exhausted, but something had shifted in his expression. The rigid determination was gone, replaced by raw vulnerability. What happens now? He asked. Now? Roderick stood, helping Lucian to his feet. Now you take the throne. Lucian's eyes widened. What? No, it's yours. I renounced, and I'm refusing it. Roderick's tone was firm. I've been king for 3 centuries, Lucian. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've made war and peace and every compromise in between, and I'm tired. But the court will follow strength, and you showed them strength today. Not the brutality Alaric promised, but moral courage. That's what they need now. Lucian shook his head. I don't know how to rule. I'm not ready. Neither was I when I took the throne, but I had advisors, allies, people who believed in what we could build. Roderick smiled. You'll have the same, including me, if you'll have me. As what? As your father. Nothing more, nothing less. Lucian stared at him, disbelieving. You'd really walk away? From the throne? Yes. From you? Never again. And sometimes the greatest power a parent can give their child isn't protection or wisdom. It's trust that they can succeed even when they don't believe it themselves. Lucian was quiet for a long time, then slowly he nodded. There are conditions. Name them. The human purges stop immediately. Any vampire found hunting innocents answers to the crown. Roderick's smile widened. Agreed. And that woman, Elsa, she gets protection, a title, lands, whatever she needs. Same for her son. They'd probably prefer to be left alone, but I'll make sure they're safe. And you, Lucian's voice firmed, you stay, not as king, but as advisor. I need you. Roderick felt warmth spread through his chest, the first real warmth he'd felt in months. Then I'll stay. They embraced again, this time not in grief, but in tentative hope. When they emerged from the council chamber, Elsa stood waiting, David asleep against her shoulder. She searched Roderick's face. Everything all right? It will be, he said. Then to Lucian, this is Elsa Miller and her son, David. They're the reason I'm alive. Lucian bowed deeply. Then I owe you more than I can ever repay. Elsa shifted uncomfortably. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should do." "But most wouldn't have." Lucian straightened. "You'll be honored at court." "No, thank you." Elsa's tone was polite but firm. "We just want to go home." Roderick and Lucian exchanged glances. "Then home you'll go," Roderick said gently, "with my eternal gratitude." Because sometimes the greatest reward isn't recognition or riches. It's simply being allowed to return to the life you chose. 3 months later. The borderlands had always been a place of tension, where vampire territories met human settlements, where old hatreds simmered just beneath the surface. But now, something new was taking root, a refuge. It stood on neutral ground, a sprawling structure of stone and wood that looked like it had grown organically from the earth itself. Neither fortress nor village, but something in between. A place where the rules of the old world didn't apply. Elsa stood on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the fields. Children played in the yard, human and vampire alike, their laughter rising into the evening air without fear or separation. David was among them, teaching a small vampire girl how to move her chess pieces. She couldn't have been more than 7 in appearance, though Elsa knew she was probably decades old. "Night moves in an L," David explained patiently, "like this." The girl giggled and copied him, her small fangs visible when she smiled. Elsa still marveled at all of it. After the confrontation at the palace, she'd returned home expecting life to go back to normal. She'd saved a king, helped expose a conspiracy, and witnessed a coronation. Surely that was enough adventure for one lifetime. But Roderick had other ideas. He'd appeared at her cottage 2 weeks later, looking healthier than she'd ever seen him. The burns had healed completely, leaving only faint scars. His eyes were clear, purposeful. "I have a proposition," he'd said. And now, here she was, not as a subject or servant, but as a partner in something unprecedented. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, and the best adventures are the ones you choose, not the ones that choose you. The door opened behind her. Roderick emerged, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. "You're still not used to it," he observed, handing her a cup. "Used to what?" "Peace, safety. The idea that this might actually work." Elsa smiled. "Can you blame me? 3 months ago, I was hiding a vampire king in my root cellar. Now I'm running a sanctuary with him." "Co-running," Roderick corrected. "This was your idea as much as mine." That wasn't entirely true. After Lucian's coronation, Roderick had renounced all claims to the throne, just as he'd promised. But he hadn't walked away from responsibility entirely. "These borderlands need something," he'd told Elsa. "Not a treaty or a wall, but a bridge. A place where humans and vampires can see each other as something more than threats or food." "And you think that's possible?" she'd asked. "I think if anyone can make it possible, it's someone who already proved that compassion transcends species." So they'd built it together. With Lucian's blessing and resources, they'd created the refuge, a place for orphans, refugees, anyone who'd been caught in the crossfire of centuries of conflict, humans who'd lost their families to vampire raids, vampires who'd been cast out for refusing to hunt, children of both kinds who just needed somewhere safe to grow. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. "Letter came from the capital today," Roderick said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "Lucien's making progress on the new laws. Hunting restrictions are being enforced. He's already executed 2 nobles who violated them." Elsa raised her eyebrows. "Executed. He's learning that mercy and justice aren't the same thing." Roderick's expression was complicated, pride mixed with concern. "He asks about you, wants to know if you need anything." "Tell him we're fine." "I always do. He never believes me." Elsa laughed softly. In the months since the coronation, Lucian had sent regular gifts, supplies, books, offers of titles and land. She'd refused them all, except the supplies for the refuge. "He's trying to make amends," Roderick said. "Not just to me, but to you. For putting you in danger. He didn't know I existed until I showed up with evidence of his uncle's treason. Still, he carries guilt well. Gets it from me, I suppose." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children play. A young vampire boy was showing David how to move faster, how to see in the growing darkness. David was completely absorbed, his face alight with wonder. "He's happy here," Elsa said softly. "Happier than he's been since Thomas died." "And you?" She considered the question. Was she happy? 6 months ago, she'd been a widow scraping by, collecting herbs to sell at market, trying to give her son a decent life in a world that pitied them. Now she was... what? A teacher, a healer, a bridge between two worlds? "I'm purposeful," she said finally. "That's better than happy." Roderick smiled. "I know what you mean." A young woman approached, Maya, one of the refuge's first residents. She'd been human once, turned against her will and cast out by her vampire sire when she refused to hunt. She'd arrived half-starved and terrified 3 months ago. Now she helped run the kitchens, preparing food for the human children and carefully sourced blood rations for the vampires, donated willingly from a network Lucian had established. "Dinner's ready," Maya said, "and we have newcomers. Family of 4 from the eastern villages. They heard about us and traveled for 2 weeks to get here." Elsa and Roderick exchanged glances. "I'll prepare rooms," Elsa said. "I'll speak with them," Roderick added. "Make sure they understand the rules." The rules were simple. No hunting, no violence, no prejudice. Everyone contributed, everyone was protected, and everyone started with a clean slate. It sounded idealistic, impossible even. But it was working. Sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't violence or grand gestures. It's simply choosing to see the humanity in everyone, regardless of what they are. Later that night, after dinner had been served and the newcomers settled, after the children had been tucked into bed and the refuge had grown quiet, Elsa found Roderick in his study. He was writing, letters to Lucian, reports on the refuge's progress, correspondence with other potential sanctuary sites. "You should rest," she said from the doorway. He looked up, smiling. "So should you." "I will, soon." She stepped inside. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it, walking away from the throne?" Roderick set down his pen, considering. "Every day I was king, I made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Wars, treaties, executions, pardons. I held power that most people can't imagine." He stood, moving to the window. Outside, the refuge slept peacefully under starlight. "But I never made a decision that felt as right as this. Building something instead of ruling it. Healing instead of commanding." He turned to her. "So no, I don't regret it at all." "Even though you could have had everything back?" "I have everything that matters. Purpose, peace, a relationship with my son." He paused. "And a partner who reminds me every day that true strength isn't about power. It's about choosing kindness even when it's hard." Elsa felt her throat tighten. "I'm not that noble. I just did what needed doing." "Exactly, and that's why this works." A messenger arrived at dawn with urgent news from the capital. Lucian was coming to visit, his first trip to the borderlands since taking the throne. The refuge bustled with preparation. The children were excited, the staff nervous. A king visiting was unprecedented. When Lucian arrived, he came with minimal escort and no ceremony. He dismounted in the yard and stood for a moment, taking in the sight of vampire and human children playing together. David ran up to him immediately. "Your Majesty, do you want to play chess?" Lucian blinked, then laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. "I'd be honored." Roderick and Elsa watched from the porch as father and son set up a chessboard in the yard, children gathering around to watch. "You built something remarkable," Lucian said later as they toured the refuge. "Something I couldn't have imagined even a few months ago." "We all built it," Elsa corrected. "It takes everyone choosing to try." Lucian nodded slowly. "I want to establish more. Sanctuaries like this across the borderlands. Places where the old hatred can't take root. That would take resources, political will. I'm the king. I have both." Lucian's expression was determined. "My father spent centuries trying to balance vampire interests against everything else. I want to build something different, something where balance isn't necessary because we're not on opposite sides anymore." And in that moment, watching a young king embrace his father's dream and make it bigger, Elsa understood. Redemption wasn't just personal, it could be generational. As the sun set on another day at the refuge, Elsa stood with Roderick and David, watching Lucian's carriage disappear down the road. "Do you think it'll work?" David asked. "All those new refuges?" Roderick put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I think anything's possible when people refuse to accept that enemies have to stay enemies." David considered this, then nodded seriously. "Then I'll help. When I'm older." "You're helping now," Elsa said softly, pulling him close. They stood together as darkness fell. A widow, a former king, and a boy who'd helped save them both. Not a family by blood, but a family nonetheless. Because in the end, the greatest kingdoms aren't built on thrones or bloodlines. They're built on choice, compassion, and the radical belief that even in darkness, dawn is always possible. And that's how a single mother's act of compassion didn't just save a king. It changed an entire kingdom. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is choose kindness when the world expects cruelty. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more tales of courage, redemption, and unexpected heroes. Drop a comment below. Would you have saved Roderick? What would you risk for a stranger? Your thoughts make this community special. Until next time, remember, dawn is always possible, even in the darkest night.